All right, hey guys, today we are talking about my initial impressions of this guy right here. Yes, that is the Canon EOS R5. So I think more and more people are starting to acquire this camera just because I know there was a shortage on the Canon supply for the Canon EOS R5. So now I think they're starting to catch up again, and you'll see it's in stock at Amazon and B&H and various sites like that. So I think people are starting to acquire the camera and more reviews are coming out. So the fact that there are so many videos out on this camera already, the specific perspective I want to give you guys is someone that has went from the RP to the R to the R6 to now the R5. More specifically, I think that the perspective of going from the Canon EOS R6 to the R5 might be really helpful for you guys, and I definitely plan on doing videos on what that transition is like. And I definitely want to talk about the differences that people don't commonly talk about when we're talking about the R6 and the R5. So if you want to see videos like that and you think it might be helpful for you, subscribe to my channel. Quickly, I want to thank you guys for getting me to 500 subscribers. My goal is in the next 2 months, I want to hit 1,000 subscribers. I definitely know that is a big goal to try to hit, but I think if I stick with my objective of trying to get you guys quality content that is actually helpful for you, then it shouldn't be an issue. So if you like this channel, subscribe. So again, I haven't had this camera for too long. This is just a video on my initial impressions of the camera. Okay, so in terms of build quality, and I'll bring this camera up here just so you guys can take a closer look. Obviously, if you're gonna be paying this much for a camera, you should expect premium build quality. I would say that it's a perfect mix between the Canon EOS R and the Canon EOS R6. So one thing I liked about the EOS R is it felt really sturdy and it felt like it could take a lot of abuse, and you get a similar feeling to that. But what I like more about the Canon EOS R5 is the grip actually has more of a texture to it, so it is grippier than on the Canon EOS R. The R seemed like it was too smooth and it could slip out of my hand at any moment. So you really are getting this kind of perfect combination of the feel of the Canon EOS R6 and the build quality of the Canon EOS R. The transition from going from the R6 to the R5 was really easy because the setup on the actual camera, especially the back right here, is pretty much exactly the same as the R6. So, while I didn't map this camera and the customizable controls the exact same way as my R6, it was pretty similar. I spent my first few days with this camera really customizing the controls on it and making everything as fluent as possible. So if you guys want to see a video about how I customize my controls for this camera, then let me know in the comment section below and I can definitely make that happen. Also, a real quick note on the grip size, it is just as substantial as the Canon EOS R6 and bigger than on the R, which is good. Now this camera is heavier than the EOS R6 and the R, I believe, but it's not really that noticeable, and I actually prefer it when I'm pairing it with lenses like the RF 50mm and the RF 85mm. And real quick, I'll show you guys what those lenses look like on the R5. Okay, so here is the Canon RF 50mm 1.2 on the R5. This definitely feels like a perfect combination, and it's probably going to be the lens I have on this camera the most. All right, so this is the Canon RF 85mm 1.2 lens on the R5. Such a heavy lens, but the heavier body really kind of balances out the combination. So I like how it feels, for sure. For those of you who care a lot about the user experience of the camera, something I really like about the camera is the sound and the feel of the mechanical shutter when you take a picture. I think that the body being made up of more metal than the Canon EOS R6 really kind of makes that feeling of the mechanical shutter and the sound a little bit more full and a little bit more satisfying than on the R6. In terms of my initial impressions for image quality, I am personally really happy to be back at a higher resolution sensor. Not to say that the sensor on the R6 was lacking in any way, and it was definitely good enough for what I need in a sensor, especially paired with the RF lenses. You still get so much detail with those lenses on a 20 megapixel sensor. I just prefer having the higher resolution sensor because I really like taking landscape pictures, and having that ability of being able to really kind of go into your picture more and get more reach just because you have that higher resolution sensor is really nice, and something that I missed in the Canon EOS R6. And even though the sensor on the Canon EOS R5 does have an AA filter, Canon did a nice job in not letting it affect the image quality that you're getting from this camera, especially with the RF lenses, but I'll talk about that in another video. All right, so moving on to some of the barriers that I ran into with my initial test of this camera, specifically coming from the R6. And the first one is that I do hit that buffer limit noticeably faster than on the Canon EOS R6 when I'm writing to both card slots. It is kind of a given that that's going to happen just because the Canon R5 uses a CF Express card and a UHS 2 SD card, so you're not going to be able to write onto that UHS 2 SD card as fast as the CF Express card. So that's one reason why you're going to be hitting that buffer limit faster. And also the camera has to process higher resolution files and more data in general. I don't really anticipate this being an issue with my workflow and the type of photography that I do. And even if I was doing something like sports photography or wildlife photography, I'd probably just write to the CF Express card instead of both card slots, so that I have access to that larger buffer capacity. I do think it's really impressive how fast this camera clears that buffer when you reach that limit. So one thing that I've kind of been struggling a little bit with the Canon EOS R5 is the eye autofocus. Right out of the box, it doesn't seem to work as seamlessly as the Canon EOS R6 did. Now, there could be a couple different factors that are playing into the differences between the R6 and the R5. One being that the low light autofocus acquisition isn't as good on the R5 as it is on the R6. So when I was shooting in lower light conditions like that on the R6, I think I did get more keepers than on my R5, but I don't think the difference is that big. And the other thing that I need to get used to is moving from a lower resolution sensor to a higher resolution sensor. I remember that a similar thing happened when I moved from the Nikon D750 to the D850, where I was finding that I was seeing camera shake in more of my photos. And really what I needed to do was make sure that my camera form for taking pictures in a stable manner was on point, because it really matters even with the awesome in-body image stabilization in the Canon EOS R5, you need to make sure that you are as steady as possible and you have good form when you're taking photos. Because if your photo is a little bit out of focus, or if you have a little bit of camera shake, you're going to be able to notice it more on a higher resolution sensor. The R5 definitely does get noticeably warmer than the Canon EOS R6 when you're shooting video. Believe me, I'm not trying to put down the Canon R5. I just want to give you guys my honest first impressions about this camera. And these are things that aren't really big issues, but I think they might be helpful for you in making a decision if you're deciding between the two cameras. All right, so I just want to provide some closing thoughts to you guys about this transition to the Canon EOS R5 from the R6. It definitely wasn't a transition that I needed to make right now, but I ordered a CF Express Type B card like a year ago when I thought I was going to get the R5, and it's just been waiting for the camera, so I couldn't not get it. But for real though, I have these nicer RF lenses like the 50 and the 85 and the 15 and 35, and the lenses are created to be future proof, and they're created for higher resolution sensors, and I just kind of wanted to get the most out of them. I wanted to see how they performed on the R5, and it's not the best reason to transition, but it's one of the reasons that I transitioned. And it's kind of like if you were making a nice steak and you don't want to put it on a paper plate. Say you're going to wrap some brie cheese and put some pepper jelly on there, and then wrap it in prosciutto and stick it in the oven for like 30 minutes, and then you eat it with some Ritz crackers. You you should probably get better crackers to go with an awesome appetizer like that. But I'm not gonna lie, it does sound good with Ritz crackers too. One of the primary reasons why I wanted to switch to the R5, you know, maybe even above that higher resolution sensor for photography and landscape, is that I was having trouble with the yellow skin tones that I was getting from C-Log on the Canon R6, and it was just kind of a pain to sort of edit those skin tones all the time. And I will link a video of that so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But you know, I'm excited to test out the C-Log on this camera and see how it performs and what the color grading's like. So if you want to see that, subscribe to my channel. Thank you for joining me today, and I will talk to you guys later.